Hi everybody, welcome to Simply Scuba and welcome to Ask Mark, where I do my best to answer all of your scuba diving questions. Now, you probably noticed that this sort of isn't Friday as usual. You'll probably start to notice that I'm spreading out the videos to be once a week going forwards. I'll explain a little bit why a bit later, but yeah, if you have any scuba diving questions, by all means let me know down in the questions in the comments below, and if you use the hashtag AskMark either at the beginning or the end, doesn't really matter. It just makes it a lot easier for me to find it. This week we're talking about solo diving, diving by yourself, reef hooks, wireless side mount diving, long hose performance, dSMB length, and scuba diving updates. Let's dive straight in with the first question, which this week comes from Mario Schmidt, who says, is there any rule like ISO regulations for autonomous diver that is necessary to conduct deco dives? Don't get me wrong, common sense should say don't do what you haven't been trained to yet. Is there any regulation preventing recreational divers from doing a planned deco dive? No worries, I'm doing tech training at the moment, not planning to exceed my limits in any way. Good. Are there any like regulations? No. There's no scuba police who are going to arrest you as soon as you get out. They check your dive computer and then they arrest you and take you away for doing like a minute of deco or something. That doesn't. The dive master, especially if it's unplanned deco, they'll usually tell you off. Because it's quite serious, because they need to know for their dive planning and everything. But there's no, not that I'm aware of any kind of regulations, because who would enforce it and what would they do? As you said, it is more about staying within your limits is incredibly important, so that you're not pushing your boundaries too far and end up hurting yourself. But the main thing that will probably happen, which is the most serious, is your insurance policy is probably going to be null and void, because there's usually a clause in most insurance policies which basically says, and you were diving within your training or limits or something to that effect. So as soon as you if something happens, you get hurt, you lose a piece of equipment or something happens, you try and claim on that insurance, they'll look through your for your dive profiles and they say, oh well, you were diving beyond your training limits, you're on your own and you have to fit the bill. So no, I'm unaware of any like official regulations that limits anybody from doing anything. It's a free, well, most countries are free countries, to do pretty much whatever you want. But no, there's no like scuba police who are going to tell you off or something, or give you a fine or points on your diving license or anything. That doesn't really exist. But it is mainly be sensible, because people do get hurt when they do push their limits and go a little bit too far. They don't know all the intricacies of diving beyond those depths and doing these kind of things. So it's very important that you don't go beyond them without training, which is exactly what you're doing. Sorry, that's not what you're doing. You're doing the right thing in getting the training to be able to go down to those depths. I should clarify. But no, there's no like scuba police, but do be aware that it can void like insurance documents and policies. Enrique Villarec says, so my wife and I just did a dive in the Maldives where we could have used some reef hooks. In researching to purchase some, we see doubles and singles, but no dual singles. Any reason? Why couldn't we make a dual single for portability and hooking angle variability, plus the benefit of dual hook fixation? Also, we were thinking of making some with straps instead of cords, the ones used for portable hammocks. That way we can adjust the length. Also, what if we use titanium instead of stainless steel? Has anyone used, lots of questions, has anyone used cobalt chrome in seawater? Right, so single hook drift hooks versus double hook drift Hooks. So yeah, the Maldives does have quite a lot of current. So a lot of it is either drift dives, or if you want to stay in one location because you like sort of big pelagic species come drifting by, you can get these hooks, which are just metal hooks that you just plant into usually a rock, hopefully, and not coral, and then you clip that off onto your BCD and you basically just like hang there, and you can take your photos and you can do your things, and then when you're done you kind of unhook. Single versus double, it's kind of personal preference, and double kind of makes sense because you have that kind of redundancy. So if one hook slips, then you still have the second one, whereas a single is, in my mind, a bit more secure because you're more likely to plant that one properly, as opposed to there's two there, that should be sort of good enough. But hey, two single ones kind of together, don't know. I get your meaning, because the dual ones, because they're a solid fixture, they do take up a fair amount of space. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anyone make like two singles into one. Don't know, maybe there's a gap in the market, but I don't know. I think most people would either just go for a standard single or a double. I don't know if there's a market for a kind of a loose double, if that makes sense. Straps, yeah, you can use tapes, but I think for packing it away, most people do that. There's a knot that I really need to practice. That kind of concertinas all of that line down, and I don't know whether that would work with tape. But as long as you're happy with sort of wrapping it up or doing something, then yeah, there's no reason why you can't use a tape, and then just use an adjuster to shorten it if you want to stay a little bit closer. So yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Different metals, titanium, yeah. It's not the cheapest, but it is strong. Stainless steel is relatively cheap. It does the job. Most people are quite happy with it, but there's no reason why you can't use titanium. Chrome, what is that? Chrome plated cobalt. I think that has quite good saltwater resistance and like corrosion resistance from what I've read. But other than that, I don't know a huge amount about it. I don't know if it's strong or brittle or anything. I think I can't remember what I was researching, but yeah, I think it was just in general like saltwater corrosion. It was probably to do with the different titaniums, because there's alpha and beta and whatnot titanium. I must have been researching that, and I remember looking at cobalt, and yeah, it has quite good saltwater corrosion resistance, but I don't know anything else about it. So it could be quite brittle, which you probably don't want in like a hook. You want a little bit of bend so that it doesn't snap. But I could be wrong. If someone's good with metallurgy and whatnot, by all means let us know down in the comments below. But yeah, there's plenty out there. You can of course make your own if you're good with sort of titanium and smelting and all that good stuff. Then yeah, by all means sort of make your own reef hook. But of course there are plenty available commercially. Emin Atik says, I would like to ask that Sunto Eon Core works for side mount diving or not, especially with 2 tank pods. I'm friends telling me that only Shearwater has this feature. Yeah, this is quite an old question of Sunto, and it seems to be a bit of a gripe, because you do see it in diving forums. About like Sunto, especially the Eon range, about sort of when we're going to get like side mount compatibility, because they can have like firmware updates going forwards, but I don't believe they've done it yet. They're working on it. However, I don't think I've seen that patch yet on the Eon Core or the Eon Steel. I know they can connect to multiple transmitters, I think that all the way up to like 20 if you have that many stage cylinders. But I think you have to do some kind of switching process on it, so just on the dive computer, whenever you switch gases, just to confirm that, yeah, I've switched from this one to that one, and it will kind of swap. I don't think you can have both of them on the screen at the same time, whereas on something like the Perdix, yeah, the Perdix you can have at least two wireless air transmitters showing on the screen at the same time, and it just shows like T1, T2, or P1, P2. I can't remember what it actually shows, but yeah, it'll show your two tank pressures simultaneously. I imagine there are quite a few others. I imagine Ratio does it. Ratio put a lot of work into their dive computers, and having a lot of those kind of features, that would make sense. I think I've seen that somewhere. Otherwise, it's not a huge thing. I think it mainly is still Shearwater that has that feature, and I could be wrong. And when you're watching this sort of months from now, it could be that Suunto have had updated that firmware update, but I don't think Suunto Eon, especially the Eon Core, can do it at the moment. Saril Ghazali, anyone know if it will still perform on long hoses? So this was actually on a video for the Apex XL4 regulator, but this was actually quite an interesting question on, so most regulators come with like a 75 centimeter hose. That's the standard length hose that when you're buying a regulator tends to be what it comes on. But a lot of divers, myself included, dive on like long, almost 2 meter long hoses. Well, I think mine's a little bit longer than 2 meters, which is like 7 feet. Quite regularly, and does that have an effect on the performance? And this is quite an interesting question, because it would kind of make sense that if you increase the length of the hose, then the gas has to travel even farther to get to you from the first stage, so you'd get a drop in performance. However, incorrect, because we're dealing with pressure. If anything, it can improve. I mean, everything is going to be marginable, and most divers aren't going to notice any difference. If you had like a blind breathe test, you wouldn't notice, because the volume of the inside of that hose is filled up to that interstage pressure, and then when you inhale, you're taking a bit of that gas volume, so the pressure reduces a little, but because it's a larger volume, it's going to drop less than a shorter hose. So it's actually a little bit less work for the first stage to top it back up. So you're not going to notice a performance drop at all when you're breathing from a longer hose. It's not like a snorkel, and you have to draw gas all the way through this, because it's pressurized. Yeah, you're really not going to notice it, so it's not going to be an issue. I've seen quite long debates online on dive forums about divers kind of saying, oh, but what about this? And then there's like, oh no, oh yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. It's actually better. So no, it's really not an issue. Ben Heckendorn says, hi Mark, I plan to buy a dSMB, so I wonder how tall it should be. I've seen anywhere between 120 centimeters up to 180 centimeters. I've seen some shorter than 100 centimeters, but those wouldn't make sense to me. Thanks, Ben. Yeah. It depends on the weather conditions. I mean, I've seen some that I think a 3 meter dSMB is probably the longest I've ever seen, and if you're going somewhere nice and calm with no big waves, then yeah, you can get away with just a small compact little 1 meter dSMB. You can get really tiny diddy ones. They're just for training. I think it was AP Valves. They did a teeny tiny one, which is basically just the bottom end, so that you could practice different inflation techniques without having all that gas volume to then have to like either pull back down or whatever. So they're just for training. If it's like 90 centimeters to 100 centimeters, like this one, then for calm waters, that's all you really need, because that still sticks out of the water. But if you're diving in high seas with big waves, that can get lost pretty easily. So then you have the longer ones. So it's very much, it depends on the diving conditions that you're going to be in. If you can't go too big with dSMBs. The only limiting factor is then, of course, the portability, because a bigger dSMB is just physically. This one's a little inflated. It is just that much bigger to either stow away in a pocket or to fit into a bag, whereas if you have a little one, it's quite handy for travel. You can clip it off to a D-ring and it's not so obtrusive. So that's the main reason why there are little ones, for calmer waters, for traveling, so you don't have to carry this huge, great big dSMB. But if you dive regularly in like the North Sea or something, then yeah, you probably want something a little bit bigger. And finally, STE, or Stay, says, so I've been out of diving for 14 years. Oh my God. Is there anything new that you need to know about? 14 years, what's changed in diving? The main one that I've kind of been talking about a couple of weeks ago is the quarter turn. We don't really do that anymore. I think that's the real big like change, as it were. So you don't do the quarter turn back when you open up a cylinder valve. You just open it all the way and then just leave it, just finger tight. You don't wrench it open or anything. You just open it all the way. You don't do the quarter turn back anymore. It just leads to ambiguity, and some people have been hurt because they don't know whether it's all the way open or all the way closed. So they end up correcting, which is actually ending up closing it all the way and then opening it a quarter turn back, so you can get a little bit of gas but not as much gas as you might need in an incident. So we just open it all the way, and that way you know whether it's 100% open or 100% closed. Side mount is a bit more prevalent nowadays. If you suffer with a bad back, side mount diving tends to be the way. You tend to see that a bit more in open water, not just in cave diving. Struth, what else? Lots of clever little sort of alterations to, like, you've got a lot of X-deep stuff, which is just bucking the trend and making things a bit more or less standard, especially with backplate setups. Backplates were very rigid and simple, and this is it. This is the shape that everybody makes. They just stamp a different logo on it, and then that's it. X-deep, and now a lot of the other brands like Mara's XR are starting to twist their, especially their technical diving range, to be a bit more modern, a bit more practical for divers. A lot of clever materials. You get like Scuba Pro with their Hydros Pro using monoprene instead of just a webbing harness or something. Yeah, there's quite a few, but as far as procedurally, not a huge amount. You probably find dive computers are a lot more prevalent and required. Most dive sites, if you're going on like a chartered boat or something, they require you to have your own dive computer. If you don't, then you end up renting one. You usually have to have a dSMB as well. If not, again, you have to rent one. Transmitters, wireless air transmitters are a bit more popular. Dive computers nowadays, you can connect to Bluetooth. You can then add that to your social media as well, so you can show off your dive and add pictures and things. There's a lot of that nowadays. Yeah, I think it's more just catching up with the digital age, as it were. So we're seeing a lot of the like Garmin dive computers that have like heart rate monitors and all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably going to be, going forwards, it's hopefully going to be a bit more prevalent. Scuba Pro has done it for quite a few years with their human factor diving, where it uses your skin temperature and your heart rate to adjust your decompression algorithm. So if you're working really hard, then it makes it a bit more conservative. Whereas if it's nice and chilled out and you're in nice warm water, it just allows you to stay down a little bit longer. We're probably going to start to see that in a few other different branded dive computers going forwards. Color screen. Most dive computers, well, I mean, I say most dive computers, a lot of dive computers nowadays are color screen. So it's color coded, so you can see a bit more intuitively which individual piece of information you might need to know about. As opposed to the more traditional like LCD screens where you kind of look at it and you kind of either have to take it all in and notice that something is wrong or running a bit low, whereas with a color screen, that information is bright red, so you know, oh, okay, that's my NDL or whatever. Oh, I thought of something else, but I've forgotten what it was. Oh no. A lot of dive computers nowadays have rechargeable batteries, which is really handy. Instead of having to like replace the battery yourself, you just literally either plug it in or put it on one of those charging pads or something, which is pretty cool. As far as alerts, fewer dive computers beep now. They end up vibrating. So much like your mobile phone. So instead of just bugging everybody around you with this incessant beeping, it just kind of vibrates on your wrist, which is quite nice, to just alert you and not bug everybody else. And it really does get your attention. Oh, that's me. You don't just hear this beeping and wonder where it's coming from. Otherwise, a lot of masks have mask treatments. The lenses, they'll have like a UV cut glass that prevents ultraviolet light from getting in and harming your eyes. If you look at the Fourth Element Scout mask, it has 4 different lens options. Traditionally, it was only just tempered glass, and that's what you get. Now you can choose between 1 of 4, and they're all good for slightly different things. One is better for green waters, one is better for bluer waters, one is that UV protection, the other one is just fewer impurities in the glass to allow for transmission. So yeah, there is plenty of sort of updates, but procedurally, most things are pretty similar. I don't think we changed too many hand signals or added any sort of interesting new ones. The main one is in that quarter turn rule. We don't do that anymore. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, welcome back. Sort of go through your scuba review and get back into the water. And yep, that's it for another week. As I said, yeah, you'll start to see these spread out. So we're only releasing 1 video a week on a Sunday going forwards. I don't think I'm allowed to talk about exactly why right now, but I promise you will find out going forwards. But yeah, if you do have any questions, comments, queries, or corrections, if you're good on metallurgy with different metals using for reef hooks, by all means, let us know down in the comments below. Remember to like, share, subscribe, do all that social media stuff. Subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, head over to simplyscuba.com. Thank you for watching, everybody. And of course, safe diving.